काबीना ने इस फाइनेंस बिल के ज़रिए जो मैंने आपकी ये खिदमत में पेश किया अभी थोड़ी देर पहले 170 अरब रुपए के इजाफी टैक्स लगाने की मंजूरी दी है। इस मुअज़्ज़ज़ ऐवान के सामने मंदरजा झैल टैक्स तजावीज़ पेश की जा रही हैं। नंबर 1, हुकूमत ने अमीर तबके पर इजाफी टैक्स लगाने की हिकमत अमली के तहत अब लग्जरी आइटम पर GST की शरह को 17% से बढ़ाकर 25% की बुलंद सतह पर ले जाने का फैसला किया है। इसी तरह जो एयर ट्रैवल है वो फर्स्ट क्लास और बिजनेस क्लास में 20% ऑफ दी एयर टिकट या 50,000 रुपये जो भी ज़्यादा हो, विच एवर इज़ हायर, कि शादी की तकरीबात के बिलों पर 10% की शरह से विद होल्डिंग एडजस्टेबल एडवांस इनकम टैक्स नाफिज किया जाएगा। एरेटेड और शुगरी जो ड्रिंक्स हैं इनके ऊपर जो फेडरल एक्साइज ड्यूटी की शरह में इजाफा तजवीज़ किया जा रहा है।
So let's quickly understand the background of why we had to do this. We want to go back to the 9th review. We want to get a SLA done, which is our staff level agreement with the IMF. For that, in the next 4.5 months, you need to collect 170 billion rupees, which has been agreed with the fund. Now, if we think of the deeper measures which the country needs, and if you give me a second, so in 10 seconds, let's paint the picture of the current tax structure of Pakistan. A low tax to GDP ratio of 10%, keeping many sectors out of the tax net, keeping many sectors under-taxed, a large tax gap of about 50%, and our indirect collection at 63% and our direct taxation collection at 37%. This is not a pretty picture. But what has happened with the 170 billion package, which is largely also indirect in nature, is that we have to collect the 170 in the 4.5 months. If we go for the direct taxes like progressive income tax and others, they will not be collected in this interim period. So what you've seen is the GST hike to 18%, you've seen FED hike, you've seen hike on cigarettes. These are all indirect measures, but will give you the amount that is required to collect the 170, and that for us is important at this stage. Completing the 9th review is of paramount importance to Pakistan, holding under $3 billion in reserves, falling remittances and exports, and not a pretty international picture, and none of the friends coming to your help till we go to the IMF. So my view is that yes, they are indirect in nature, but Pakistan probably did not have a lot of choice in the short term. That does not mean that the picture that I've pointed to you of a taxation regime which is in need of a reset, both at the policy as well as the administrative level, we must do. So it's really important to understand that when a country doesn't make changes or course correction as it should do on a regular basis, everything seems to be very abrupt as we enter the 9th review. So let me say that it's not only the taxation of 170 billion, which is going to cause a lot of inflation, but what matters here is also the electricity hike that we've done, which we've held up for some time. The gas sector hike we've held up for 28.5 months. And that's an important figure for everyone to understand. Now, when you combine all these three, of course, I think the empirical work that I've seen north of 33% is what we are looking at for the CPI to go. You already know that your food inflation is hitting about 43%. Your core inflation is also disturbed. Your rural core is 19.4%. So yes, in the short term, there is going to be a blip on the inflationary side, and on the average, we are going to be north of 30% in the next couple of months. But what's most important to understand here is, if we were not going to do this, if we were not going to make the corrections that are needed, the slippages are big. 952 billion rupees slippage on the electricity, nearly 500 slippage on the gas sector, and this is a per annum estimate putting to you. The course correction going to do this, and the delay in the already held up 9th review was to go on. Pakistan would run out of reserves, and that's not a tenable position for a country like ours. It's become most important for us to think about our tax policy. So on the first hand, you have the federal and then you have the provincial. Let me comment on both. At the federal level, you are running exemptions You are running a skewed taxation, which is mostly to the urban, industry, and formal sectors. So it becomes inequitable. You have a complex, narrow system which is causing distortions. So let's talk about the real estate. Real estate is the sector where capital gains after 5 years become zero. I've always said that to take the investment out of the real estate sector and take it to more productive sectors, whether it's your industry or your stock market, where your wealth should be created, the wealth creation should happen, you need to change the incentive structure. So a capital gains is one of the most important federal level tax that we must do. At the provincial level, in a similar manner, if you tax urban property, a lot of the need of the provinces and at the district level, at the tehsil level, the funds that you need will be fulfilled. Now let's go back beyond this. Agriculture income tax is one of the most important subjects, and we always say that because it's not a federal subject, we don't tackle it. The total collection from Pakistan is 3 billion rupees a year. Compare that to the 7,670 billion we are going to collect from all the other sectors in the country. For that, I've always felt that at the provincial level, it's an income tax which the provinces must collect and take up their total tax collection over 1% of the GDP, which would solve a lot of issues also related to the NFC. The third area that I think we need to think about is the full and finality of the withholding and the presumptive taxes. For the viewers to understand, let me put it this way. If you put a big sum of money in a bank and you receive a markup payment, you are taxed at 15%, which is your full and final duty to the FPR. I've always said that we must not have these segregations. The income as a whole must be looked at. If my marginal income rate for that year is 25%, then I must be charged the interest, the presumptive, the withholding that I've been held, brought it together at the end, and must be charged at 25%. That's creating equity in the tax system. At the same time, we must remember the tax codes need to be simplified for the average Joe in the country to be able to pay tax. Another very important sector we keep forgetting is the retail sector, a big sector in Pakistan. At the table, whenever I've sat in the Q block, whenever we've tried to implement, we haven't been able to. Pakistan today is collecting taxation from 2.7 million active taxpayers. The studies point to our ability to go to over 5 million active taxpayers if we are able to automate, computerize and digitize FPR. Tax administration in Pakistan needs a reset, and we must now be prepared to make that reset. We don't do what we call risk-based audit. The figure that I have read through the studies, and these are international studies, international research work, that in transfer pricing alone, Pakistan has the potential to collect over $5 billion per annum. Pakistan's sizable tax potential should now be really looked into. It is going to be domestic resource mobilization, which will eventually get you out of all the crises that Pakistan today stands in. I have always felt that Pakistan has to reclaim its own thinking. In your newspaper, I wrote an article called Truly Unlucky. It's a title I don't usually use for Pakistan. But that came close to my heart. Pakistan is in a severe competence crisis. We have not been able to build the level of competency that we must build in key economic, energy, and food sectors at the federal level. And here I don't talk about big civil services reform. All I always say is that you need to have the administrative and the managerial side by the civil services and the professional side by people from the outside, from the academia, from the policy work that must come together to build that competency. So we take back the thinking that we have largely outsourced. Even when we want to do a flood report, we go to all the multilaterals, we go to the UN agencies, and then we also say that Planning Commission had a part. So first of all, if we have to start doing the fundamental surgery of Pakistan, Pakistan must take back the competence that we have over the years not been able to build. Number two, we must identify the key sectors, and those are not difficult to identify. Our basic reform must start with agriculture productivity. Our second reform must be on the energy sector, and that's why I said build competency in these two key areas. The third reform that I think has become now survival for Pakistan is the budget reform. At over 5,000 billion rupees of interest payment due this year, at pensions of 500 billion, our budget stands in a very, very distressed situation. That is uncomforting for me. So we must do a thorough budget review also of the PSDP, our developmental work. What should go to provinces? What should be at the federal level? The kind of throw forward in the development projects must be overcome. We must also see a timely completion of the development work. So the budget needs the third area, a serious review, and tie it up with a good NFC once you tax, once you give the ability to the provinces where they also tax the two sectors that I keep talking about, the urban property and the agriculture income tax. And of course, an industrial sector in Pakistan where manufacturing to GDP has come down to near 12% should never be acceptable to us. We must move on the millions of SMEs in the country beyond the big boys to whom we have always supported, but support these SMEs to be connected internationally and become part of the global value chain. Aligning incentives away from the non-productive sectors would help us do that. We also have to remember that investment to GDP at 15% should be not acceptable to a country like us. Deregulate, and when you deregulate, think about how you could increase the paltry FDI that comes to Pakistan. It's been under $2 billion for years that I have seen. The best place to start there is a divestment process of the SOEs, whether it's the LNG power plants, whether it's the discos, whether it's the banks, we must work on that. And lastly, these are all the things that I keep talking about that the government has to do. There is some responsibility that we as citizens must share with the government for a prosperous Pakistan tomorrow. We cannot be having a population growth rate of 2.4% and having 5.5 million births each year. I leave you with that thought. My last comment comes from the industry that I currently work in. And there we say past performance is no indicator of future performance. I really want to see that in Pakistan.